Welcome everyone to our second concurrent session of the 10th annual Siege Environmental Justice and Health Disparities Symposium. We are so happy to have you here. My name is Ariel Wharton. I'm a climate change and environmental justice specialist for Siege. We are joined by some wonderful ladies, some legends in my opinion within the environmental justice space for my Sister's Keeper celebration of women leaders in the environmental justice movement. We are so grateful to have you here, ladies. I will be speaking just briefly of what this session will, what we'll be focusing on within this session. So when you raise a woman, you raise a nation. Women and young girls are more vulnerable to the effects of climate change and environmental degradation. According to a study conducted in 2016, women are likely to experience disproportionate environmental burdens, distributional injustice, and are less likely than male counterparts to have a say in making environmental decisions, procedural injustice. Both coupled to impact women's health, which is substantive injustice. Reportedly, women have lower incomes and social status resulting from capitalist and patriarchal structures and processes. Women of color face more challenges with the threat of climate change and daily issues related to the social determinants of health. Hence, why representation from women within the environmental justice movement is so imperative to facilitating change. Women in the environmental justice movement have been working diligently to uplift their communities, address and resolve intense environmental, climate, and energy justice challenges. The list of women in the movement is long, and the women highlighted in this session have been incredible in advancing environmental justice. This session illuminates and celebrates women of color who are trailblazers and those who are emerging leaders in the environmental justice space. Additionally, panelists will share important lessons learned and provide guidance to the new generation seeking to do the important work of uplifting frontline and fenceline communities experiencing environmental, climate, and energy injustices. Welcome, ladies. Today we are blessed and joined by Peggy Shepherd, who is the co-founder and executive director of We Act for Environmental Justice. We are also joined by Dr. Jolone White Newsom, who is the Federal Chief Environmental Justice Officer within the White House Council on Environmental Quality, otherwise known as CQ. We are also joined by Ms. Donnell Wilkins, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Green Door Initiatives. Welcome, ladies. We are so happy to have you here. I'm so excited.
Thank you.
Yes, so we will jump right into it. And my first question to kick things off will be towards Ms. Peggy Shepherd. When we speak about long-term impact within the environmental justice space, We Act for Environmental Justice has been a cornerstone in the fight for EJ for over 30 years. Can you share some of the most significant changes or impacts you've seen within communities that you serve over this period, and what key strategies have most been effective in driving these changes?
Well, at We Act, we've been fortunate to have a number of successful campaigns over the years, beginning with our first campaign against a sewage treatment plant, which was constructed in Harlem with no community input and wasn't built to be a good neighbor. When the plant began operating, emissions and odors were going throughout the community, and we were able to develop a 6-year organizing campaign, and we got the mayor to commit $55 million to fix what was a brand new plant, that it won all kinds of design awards. And we were also with the Natural Resources Defense Council, NRDC, who was our attorney. We were made monitors of a 5-year plan to fix the plant, and we were given money to hire an engineer so that we could sign off and when we felt that the work had been done. So that was our first very successful campaign. Then came our Dirty Diesel campaign, because we understood that we housed over 1/3 of the largest diesel bus fleet in the country. And so all of those depots for these buses were in uptown neighborhoods. And we were aware of the diesel pollution and the impact on public health that were caused by the diesel emissions. And so we were able to file a Title VI complaint against the MTA. That didn't go anywhere in a Republican administration, but it forced the MTA to begin to take our complaints seriously. And we were able to work with them on their newest bus depot to make it a LEEDs, meaning a green depot with all of the buses inside, no idling outside. And again, that was a very big win for us. And then again, we've had successes passing an all electric buildings act, which basically bans gas in all new construction. And so we were able, with two other organizations, to get that passed at the city council in New York. And we have a similar law pending at the state level. And then I guess lastly, we've passed a cumulative impacts law in New York State, modeled after a similar one in New Jersey. And that really goes to the heart of environmental justice, which really forces the state to take into consideration all sources of pollution in a community before granting permits for additional pollution. And of course, permitting is such a foundational concern for environmental justice communities. And so again, it's hard work, but the most valuable component of our advocacy is really having an informed and engaged membership.
Wow, no, thank you for that. Wonderful. Within the environmental justice space, there's so much heaviness happening. So it's always wonderful to really hear the wins, hear that your work is paying off. You just keep pushing. It is working, paying off, and there's hope. The hope is well alive. So thank you. I definitely got goosebumps because you hear a lot of heavy, and hearing the wins is always just a treat. So thank you for that, Peggy. So with that question, I will shift to Dr. Jolene White Newsome. So Peggy spoke about passing of cumulative impacts bills and other spaces within the government, and really the importance of policy. So as the federal chief environmental justice officer, you play such a crucial role in shaping the national environmental justice policies within the nation. Can you share how the CEQ Council on Environmental Quality is working to institutionalize environmental justice across federal agencies?
Sure, and thank you, Ariel. And first of all, congratulations on this being the 10th year of the Siege Symposium. I remember the first one,
Wow.
And it continued to grow and flourish. So thank you for creating this space, and you and the team and Dr. Wilson. And I also have to honor, Peggy and Donnell again. I'm very humbled to even be in this space with them. So when you talked about trailblazers and people that have done amazing stuff, I'm one of those folks that are trying to come behind them a little swiftly. So just want to honor both Peggy and Donnell. When I think about institutionalization, what is amazing about President Biden and Vice President Harris is that from day one, that was their goal. With the first executive order on the first week of his presidency, President Biden signed Executive Order 14008, called Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad. But it was more than just climate. It was setting forth the most ambitious environmental justice agenda ever that this nation has ever seen. So we can't discount that. So when you talk about institutionalization at the highest level, that EO is major. But also what was a part of that EO is critical. A lot of things, and for folks here, if you haven't read the EO, please do. But one of the many initiatives in that EO was the Justice 40 initiative. And I feel like these spaces are always an opportunity for education. And when we talk about Justice 40, we think about the president's goal of making sure that 40% of the resources of this federal government, so money, technical support, et cetera, are getting to those communities that are overburdened with pollution and underinvested in. And we know And most folks know that have tried to get money from the government or get money from anybody, that oftentimes those places that need it the most have the hardest time and have to overcome the most barriers to get that funding. So when you talk about institutionalization and Justice 40 being one of those vehicles per se, it's not just about the money, but it's actually institutionalizing practices that actually help folks overcome that burden. So Justice 40 is about really changing the way we do business in the government. I mean, actually reaching out to communities that we want to get the money, changing the way notice of funding opportunities, NOFOs are written and characterized, really using tools like our climate and economic justice screening tool, which is a mapping tool called the CJIS. Google it if you haven't seen it, but that directs our federal agencies to these communities that need these resources the most. And so to cap off that executive order, there was another one that the president signed just last year, EO 14096, again, revitalizing our nation's commitment to environmental justice for all. So again, when you talk about institutionalization, it's not just one or two agencies, it is all the federal agencies across this government and the White House that are making that commitment to EJ for the long run. And so particularly in the EO 14096, there is a requirement that agencies develop strategic plans, but also ways to make sure that we're holding them accountable to these plans that they're creating to advance environmental justice related to their agency's mission. So what I will say is there are a lot of different things that are happening to make what I say EJ stick for the long run, that this is not just a passing fancy. But I think grounded in all of this is the fact that we wouldn't have had an EO 14008, we wouldn't have had EO 14096 if not for the voices of community, folks here on the screen and others that have helped shape what these EOs needed to do. So that I think is going to help us as the federal government stay accountable, continue to understand the value of institutionalization of environmental justice in our federal government. So there's a lot going on, but just again, continuously grateful for the folks that continue to push us to make sure that EJ sticks for the long run.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Dr. White Newsome. And, absolutely, as you said, when this administration came in, they went really hard, right to work. And it's really important to have that in our corner, moving forward within the environmental justice space. And I know you spoke on Justice 40 and really even the NOFO and really aiming to get the money into communities. So I would like to shift my next question to Ms. Donnell. With respect to community-centered approaches, the Green Door Initiative focuses on building capacity within marginalized communities to address environmental justice and public health issues. Can you discuss a successful project or program where this community-centered approach really led to measurable improvements in environmental health outcomes?
Sure, and thank you. And I'm going to follow these two awesome women, and I really want to acknowledge Peggy's role in helping me to onboard into the environmental justice work. And we could talk later about that in terms of how women have been, recognized and increasingly important and valuable in this work. And Dr. Jalan, is just a blessing to see her, Dr. J, as she's affectionately known, because she's from Detroit. And I remember, and I'm in Detroit, born and raised, and I remember this young woman who was just passionate about environmental justice and just taking a role in putting her imprint on that, and to see her where she is today is just a real blessing. So thank you, Ariel. The work around some of the things improving environmental health in our community has been very important to me. I'll start off with the work around community-based participatory research. When I got involved in this work, EJ communities were constantly being researched, research without input, research without benefiting from whatever the findings of that research was, and folks walking away with the information that they gathered and extracted from the community, but didn't return the favor by providing strategies for implementing and reducing and mitigating the environmental harm that they were studying. So this idea of making certain that people in our community have a voice that contribute to the ideas and the focus on environmental health and justice was really appealing to me. And I've been fortunate to help others on board and think about ways that they can lead the conversation and discussions around research. So community-based participatory research, um, working collaboratively, hand in hand with academic institutions to ensure that there's no abuse taking place even there, because we know the history in our country. And so the idea of being able to help folks create the kind of questions and create the priorities from their perspective is really key. So I've been able to work with these institutions and the community around, say, lead poisoning and dealing with the impacts of lead poisoning and ways that we could mitigate by utilizing policies that would demand that practices would be changed in a way that removes that burden from our communities. Working with folks around asthma and air pollution, for example. With the University of Michigan, been working for a very long time, many, many years, on addressing the issues of poor air quality. And of course, in Detroit, we stand out for the entire state of Michigan. We stand out with poor air quality in the county of Wayne, where Detroit sits, because about 87% of the known polluting facilities exist in that footprint, where nearly 90% of the people of color for the state of Michigan resides. So the impacts of asthma and other respiratory diseases and whatever are very prevalent. And so working to identify maps, utilize the tools that Dr. J and others have spoke about to identify where the hotspots are, and then build up an army of people who could actually defend their community, their neighborhoods in ways that would demand the kind of protective measures. So, you know, for a long time, environmental justice, we've spoke about this unequal protection under the law when it comes to environmental protection. And by having champions that live and are impacted on the front lines, speak to these issues, demand accountability, demand practices based on real data and research is very, very important. So yeah, and being able to gain the respect and demand the respect from these academic institutions and others to respect the fact that folks in our communities are knowledgeable, they have ideas for strategies that would improve the quality of life for folks around this. So yeah, the Green Door Initiative continues to build upon that work. We're doing that around solar and renewable energies. We're doing that around youth leadership and another number of other areas to just continue bringing in the right kind of voices to make certain that this work accomplishes what it's set out to do.
Wow, thank you so much. Definitely, hearing from you and the work that you do within your space and the importance of community-based participatory research, absolutely, it's heavily embedded within environmental justice. It should be a staple within working in communities by now. So absolutely, especially the importance of asking or wanting community members to also be their own scientists. You know, anybody can participate, or you don't necessarily need to be in
That's right.
a scientist or within a university to have knowledge. So I 100% align with that. I thank you for sharing all of that. So I want to pivot back to you, Peggy. I know you spoke on some of the bills and cumulative impact bills and different policies, and I wanted to know, so since We Act has been instrumental in influencing environmental policy at various levels, how do you approach advocacy to ensure that community voices are meaningfully integrated into policy decisions? And is there any specific instance where this approach has led to, I mean, you did mention some, so led to a major policy shift?
Well, yeah, being a community-based organization has been critical to the success of our policy work. We have a strong organizing team. We have a strong policy team. And so we understand that our community has lived experience that really informs our policies, and that those voices are instrumental in advocating for those policies. So to give you an example, we had a long history of fighting to eliminate childhood lead poisoning in New York. In fact, our local law of 2004 is one of the strongest lead poisoning legislation in the country. And in the last few years, we have added 5 more amendments because we saw gaps to, again, protect children. So when we engaged on this, there were green groups working on the issue, and their idea of pushing this forward was to have press conferences at City Hall with pediatricians from around the country. And we weren't really moving the ball. And so when We Act joined, we realized that we had to tell the stories of the mothers and the families who had child poison, who had children who were lead poisoned. And so we began bringing those mothers to City Hall and doing videos to talk, for them to tell their story. And that made all of the difference, because when you have friends and family who've been adversely impacted and you can tell those stories, it's powerful. And that's what helped us pass a landmark legislation. And it's really been a blueprint that we've used ever since at the city, state, and even the federal level. It's very, very important to tell the stories of real people. It's great to have the experts. We need the facts, we need the research, we need the science, but that's not everything. Without the human piece of how it actually affects people on a day-to-day basis, you don't really get that compelling picture that moves legislators. And so again, community organizing combined with policy has been our secret to victory. And I think that's very, very important. And we've got to keep folks organizing on the ground to infuse public policy with the humanity and with the stories of real life.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Absolutely very moving. It's imperative. And thank you. I mean, as a EJ leader, it's wonderful to hear that that's something that you consistently push for and try to integrate, because they're both needed, not just one or the other. You don't hear from the policymakers, they don't actually know what's going on in the communities. So it's really important. So thank you for that, Peggy.
And it makes us different than the national green groups.
Right.
Because we have people on the ground. We're talking about what's happening in real time to real people.
Yes. And you mentioned mothers, you mentioned women again. I know, within that space, and I'll just pivot very quickly to that, navigating that space for you, women in leadership in EJ, as a pioneering woman in the EJ space. How has this experience shaped your approach to leadership, and are there any unique challenges or opportunities, I'll say successes as well, that you've encountered? Because we know it can be probably wonderful at times and then very hard at times.
Well, I think when you're working in a community,
Mm-hmm.
Being a woman is an opportunity. People are used to women doing community work. Um, I think we're a little more accessible. People are more used to us knocking on the door or stopping in the street and talking to folks. But it's really been as a Black person where the challenge is more than being a woman. Being a Black person in a large environmental field, because environmental justice is, part of the environmental sector. And being a Black person in that sector, it, creates creates challenges. I remember when we were working on the sewage treatment issue, and again, NRDC was our attorney. The media would call our white guy, attorney instead of calling me, who lived 3 blocks away from the sewage treatment plant. And finally, he had to tell the media he would not give an interview until they had talked to me. And I really believe that they weren't doing that not because I was a woman, but because I was a Black woman, and they're not used to talking to Black women about science and key concerns. So again, I think the racial equity aspect has been a stronger challenge than being a woman.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I love that we're getting even deeper. This is a wonderful discussion. I would love to pivot to you, Dr. White Newsome, as well, because, within navigating the federal leadership space as a Black woman, as not a leader, not a woman, but as a Black woman, what has your experience been within this predominantly male dominated space, and how do you ensure that the perspectives and needs of women of color, Black women, are represented in the environmental justice policies you help to shape?
Yeah, I'm trying to marinate on what Peggy just said, because it speaks highly. Because I guess when I think about the women that have shaped me, they have gone through so much more than what I faced. So when I think about my grandmother and my mom and all the stories that they've told me about being the first, being the lonely only, being overlooked simply because not only you Black or brown, but because you're a woman. And so I guess I came into this space expecting, uh, that kind of norm, particularly in the environmental space. And I guess what I think has always kept me going is that, women have been such strong advocates and caregivers for so long. And regardless of how busy we are, how many balls we're juggling, what resources we do or don't have, we make it happen. And that is our track record. Like, we make magic happen with sometimes a little bit of nothing. And so for me, when I think about being a Black woman in this space, in this time right now, I am immensely grateful. And I know that my assignment is to make sure that the voices of so many that have been capped, closed off, ignored, are uplifted. So everything I do is really in service to making sure that those folks that have not had a platform, a microphone, whatever, that we listen and hear and take that in. And I think, in terms of like the challenge piece, I mean, I think about the fact that there have been a lot of firsts in my life. And my goal is to make sure that I'm not the last. So when I think about being the first Black engineer at this plant in Texas, that they had to build a place for me to change my clothes because there had never been a woman in this facility. When I think about being the first as a fellow for a science-based organization, the blessing of being the first director of federal policy at WE Act, and now the first federal chief environmental justice officer. I know everywhere that I am able to go, there's going to be a sense of patriarchy. There's going to be sexism, racism, all this stuff, assumptions that I've seen in every place that I've gone. And it doesn't stop with the White House, right? And so I think you expect that and you learn how to manage it. But most importantly, you call it out. And what I try and do, and particularly for my staff and other women and women of color, particularly when I see these forces working against us, I'm not complicit. And so I think that is important as women and as women of color, especially. We cannot be complicit. We have to try and make the situations we're in better for those that are coming behind us. And so I think about legacy all the time. And that is what is important to me, and particularly not only the president's legacy on environmental justice, but how people are treated. Because again, if you are fighting for environmental justice and you're being treated unjustly while you're doing this work, that's an oxymoron. So again, I think the nature of Black women, particularly, we wear our capes every day. And my goal, again, as a mom of 2 young girls, is to make sure that life may be a little bit easier for them, but to make them aware that regardless of how many degrees you get behind your name, regardless of how high you go, you are still going to, unfortunately, deal with some men that don't want to see you where you are, some folks that are going to assume that you're the secretary versus the person running the meeting when you walk in a room, or assume that you don't have the experience or the wisdom, whether it's in the classroom or on the streets, to even provide value to the problem that you're trying to solve. So that's what keeps me motivated, knowing that the folks behind me went through much more. We got to create a legacy for the folks that are coming. And that is really, I think, our mission as women and Black women, to take care of each other.
Wow, thank you for that, Dr. White Newsom. Yeah, absolutely, legacy, the importance, and then also having the allies, like, as within your story, Peggy, the person who's like, hey, I'm calling this out too. I see what's happening. But of course, fighting for ourselves, for each other, with each other is key. So, and Donnell, I would like to give you a chance to, of course, answer this question within working as a woman within the environmental justice field. Within the Green Door Initiative, have you seen the role of women evolve in community activism and environmental justice? And if so, can you share some examples of how you've taken on leadership within your different sectors, different spaces, and driven change?
Oh man, I can tell a whole book on the experiences
Right.
of being a woman in this space. I will say that it has always been our space to champion and speak and protect our communities. The environmental justice movement is majority women led and majority women of color led. And to be honest, uh, I will speak to the tenacity of being a Black woman and holding it up even when you don't have the support of those that can look like you or almost look like you, right? We've had those bumps and humps and whatever. So what's been really pleasing for me is to be that bridge that Dr. J just spoke about, in terms of recognizing those in the past and telling our story so that no one else can hijack our story as their own, which is a common denominator in this work, but also inspiring that next generation. So yeah, all along that trajectory, there's been amazing women who found out that their voice was valuable, and that they've knocked on my door and like, Donnell, I've learned about you, your work here, blah, blah, blah. And any kind of wisdom you could provide. And I'm always an open book. And that's part of my purpose in this work, is to make certain that I help make it easier for that bridge crossing to occur. And when it comes to encouraging and motivating young women we work with as young as 14 and 15 and whatever. That's been a constant part of my work. And for them to recognize, for me to recognize that they got it, right? And wherever they find themselves, wherever they intend to land, they can bring this experience and knowledge of leadership along, and it's their right to have it, right? Um, yeah, because the other part of this is until our children can breathe clean air like anybody else, drink safe water like anybody else, be in school buildings where asthma is not being triggered and they can learn and thrive and achieve what they were supposed to when they were born into this earthly realm. Until all of that is equal and folks are doing that, that's our job as nurturers, as models for it, uh, continuing to do it with integrity. That's what I heard in Dr. J and Peggy's words. To do it with integrity, to do it with a determination where you're not going to quit. And honey, I got some stories about the attempt to make me quit, but couldn't occur because it was my purpose to achieve. So they may have attempted, no weapon formed, but it did not prosper. You understand? Because I was born to do this. And that's part of my message to women, especially young girls, is like, find your purpose in this work and don't let anything or anyone stop you in doing it. Because when you are anointed to do this kind of work, it almost looks like, oh, that's easy, so anybody can do it. And you may try, but the results truly will not be the same. And you can't stop purpose if you're determined to walk and flow in it. So as a woman, yeah, I want to see children thrive. And when I find out that children in my community can't thrive academically because they've been lead poisoned, and then remove this whole stain of the victim being responsible for that, and not looking at policy and other things that have opened the door for those kind of things, and then being blamed. Your children, you're just not good parents, or they're eating lead chips, and no one wants to talk about lead-based gasoline and factories and facilities and stuff that are contributing to that incineration of trash and being the host and home to all of that. No one wants to acknowledge that that's a contributing factor. So we got to stand up. We have to speak for our community. We have to protect our children. And whatever the price is, you have to open your mouth and show up and do that thing. Just like what I saw in this debate that I watched last night. Step up and do your thing, right? Because we're all going to benefit from it. So yeah, I've seen a lot of women emerge, grow, take leadership, and I support their work as the best way that I can so that they can continue it. And, you know, this last thing I'll say about this, because I remember stepping into this role of leadership around environmental justice. And I'm a Christian, I'm a believer. I don't shy from that. People know that about me. And I remember thinking at one point, this is really hard. What am I doing? What makes me think I can do this? And I heard a small, still voice say to me, well, because you're not a stereotype, you're a prototype. And that I have hung on to the entire extent of my career, which has been over 30 years. So hope that's helpful, Ari.
No, lovely. Thank you for all of your responses. I feel like they were all very unique, but very similar, of course, in the same. We have to push for work with each other for ourselves, but also you are your own purpose. So thank you for that. Very inspiring as well. And I love that you are not the stereotype, you're the prototype for sure. Main characters. But I do have a question that I'd like for all of you to actually answer. So the question from the chat on YouTube is, when you go into a meeting, how do you prepare for the bias of being a woman or a woman of color? And if anybody would like to jump in, you can go ahead.
I don't think about it. I'm focused on what I'm there for, uh, and have to deliver on that. Just like I said in these previous comments, like have to open my. I walked into a Chamber of Commerce meeting, I recall years ago, and received hisses and boos as I walked through because yeah, I'll never forget it. And it was because there was this, conversation taking, this discourse taking place, that we were trying to stop jobs and businesses and create, havoc in our communities around the economy and that kind of stuff. And of course, that's not what we were trying to do. But I mean, it was the Chamber of Commerce. Of course, there are folks who were anti-environmental justice through and through. They did not hide it.
Well, I'm a Black woman. I've always been one. And so when I go to meetings or go to a new place, I always know that I must be better prepared. I'm always prepared. I know that I need to, be appropriate and relevant in the way I look, the way I talk, and my preparation. And I'm always, that's just my persona. That's the persona you have to adopt, because there are always going to be people who look at us in a stereotypical way. But I don't think about that anymore. I just know that I've got to be relevant and I've got to be prepared. And when I do that, I put my best foot forward. And that's all I think we can expect of each other and of ourselves.
Yeah, I totally agree with Donnell and Peggy. Like, I don't think about it too much anymore. Now, maybe 20, 30 years ago, yeah, I might have been a little bit scared. Now it's like, but I totally agree. I mean, and it's something my mom has always told me, like, you gotta always be a level up, a couple of levels up, right? So in terms of that preparation, it's not just kind of knowing the agenda. You got to know the people in the room. You need to do your work as much as possible. You need to know who your allies are and who they aren't. And you might have to do some pre-conversations before you walk into that room. You have to know your purpose and your stance and your perspective on whatever issue. And I think, making sure that you are clear and grounded in your values and what you're bringing and what you have to say is important. Those are the ways when I come to a meeting now, if I'm not running the meeting, that is so critical. Because oftentimes, and this was something, as a younger person, I would go into a meeting and just be like, and then I'd leave saying, well, I should have said this, or, wish I could have, should have, would have. And if I just bit more prepared, and also confident in that what I have to say as a woman and a Black woman was just as important as the white guy on the other side of the table, I wouldn't have been scared. So I think don't ever, which is a practice that I try, I listen because I'm a listener, but you don't leave a meeting without somebody hearing something come out of your mouth, even if it's an I agree or I feel differently, because you are there for a reason. And sometimes you are the only voice of reason and consciousness in that place. And if you're just there and you don't utilize your seat at the table, then what's the point? So it is so critical that you use your Blackness and your womanness as an advantage, because you are there because people want to know most of the time. And even if they don't know you there, because you're supposed to be there, divinely ordered to be there to break up the monotony and the normalcy that's not working for our people. So it is, I think about things and I so differently now, and I'm continuing to grow. But you gotta be ready. Got to be ready to fight.
No, wow. I mean, what I've heard from this is stand in your confidence from Donnell. Peggy, always be prepared. And Dr. White Newsome, speak up because no one else will speak for you. So
That's the
all in
truth.
all, I mean, that sounds like a delicious combination of, everybody you've heard this, whoever dropped the comment in the chat, and everyone else who's listening, just heed this advice for sure. So thank you for that. I am going to pivot back into our questions. And this one, Dr. Van I know you just finished speaking, but this one is back to you. So I want to speak more about recent policy developments. As the Federal Chief Environmental Justice Officer, you're at the forefront of initiatives, tools, resources, etc. So what recent developments or initiatives within the White House Council on Environmental Equality, apologies, are you currently working on, and how do you envision these efforts advancing environmental justice at a national level?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I just want to, be clear, because sometimes, the Council on Environmental Quality, a lot of folks feel like we do the work of a federal agency where we give money, where we, do enforcement or regulation, and we don't do that. Our role is really to help implement the president's agenda and work with our federal agency partners to do all of that, like grant making and make sure the enforcement happens and all that stuff. So we're kind of like this body that executes the president's agenda, but working with so many different partners. And so our superpower is convening, helping our agency partners, being a listening ear to communities and other folks. So when you talk about the initiatives that we have just recently shared, those are, again, grounded in the president's agenda. There's a couple of things that I'll raise up that I want to make sure people know about. A couple months ago, the end of July, we had the first ever White House Environmental Justice Summit on Action. And it was an opportunity, again, to, I would say, appreciate the progress that has been made in this administration on advancing environmental justice and really hear stories from folks that are doing the work on the ground, but also I think acknowledge that we still have a long way to go. And so as a part of that summit, which was really the first convening of this administration, we announced a couple of things. One is ej.gov. So I hope folks are taking notes, because ej.gov is a one-stop resource for everything EJ across this administration. So I encourage you to take a look at that website, share it with your friends and family. If you have comments or things that you can't find, let us know. The other announcement that I want to raise up is the phase 2 of our environmental justice scorecard. Now, folks say, scorecard, are you like giving grades to agencies and ranking them? No, that's not the purpose. The purpose of the scorecard is for agencies to have a way every year to show their progress on advancing environmental justice. And so what is cool about this next phase of the scorecard, which was very much, I would say, modeled after some of the recommendations of our White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, our WEJAC, is that there is a pretty substantive section on the Justice 40 initiative that I talked about earlier. So again, the goal of the Justice 40 initiative, to get 40% of the overall benefits to communities that are overburdened by pollution and underinvested in. I encourage you to take a look at our environmental justice scorecard. Again, Google it. And it not only talks about different categories of how agencies are approaching advancing the president's agenda, but in the Justice 40th section, it talks about how this $613 billion is really being, I would say, operationalized in places and spaces across this country, which is very, very important. So I encourage you to take a look at that. The last thing, which I think gets a little bit to the first question around institutionalization. As a part of this summit, we also announced that 24 of our federal agency partners signed a memorandum of understanding. I know that doesn't sound exciting or sexy or whatever, but what this MOU signifies is that our agencies, our federal agency partners, so the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Energy, Department of Interior, and others, have recommitted themselves to advancing the environmental justice agenda the president set forth. And so what this means is that, again, this is not just a one agency thing. This is environmental justice for all, and folks don't have the option, folks meaning our agency partners, to opt out. They have to make EJ a part of their plan. So again, there are a lot of efforts going on, and I just want folks to make sure that they are engaged and informed And part of what we try and do also, which is the last thing that I'll mention, and it's not new, it's about a year old, is our White House campaign for environmental justice. Now, really the goal of that was to answer this call of, as a regular person, not in government, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on about environmental justice. I don't know how to reach out to this agency. Agencies are not coming to my community to see what's happening. And so we started this campaign about a year ago, and probably 50 or so engagements later, what we've tried to do is make sure our agency partners are coming into places, having conversation, talking explicitly about how communities can take advantage of all these $600 billion of resources out there. And it might not seem like a big deal, because I told you CEQ doesn't give money, but it is a big deal, because oftentimes just sending folks to a website isn't enough. They want to talk to a real person. They want a real person to see what's going on in their community. And that is part of CEQ's role, is to try and make that connection. So those are some of the recent, I guess, developments that are going on, and we continue to work hard in a whole bunch of other areas. Ariel, thanks.
Thank you. And thank you for giving everyone the website. That is ej.gov. If you did miss that, and we'll drop it in the chat so that everybody can have access to that. So thank you, Dr. White-Newson. I also would like to welcome Naomi Davis, who is the founder of Blacks in Green. Welcome, Naomi. We are so happy to have you on.
Oh, thank
How are
you so
you?
very much. And what a blessing to be able to join you. And apologies for we had the mayor of Chicago here talking about environmental justice this morning, and here at the Green Living Room, which is our headquarters, and the idea that we are in the hood and we are doing the work of community organizing. We have a young, early 20s young lady who is our sustainable square mile manager. She came straight to us with a master's degree right out of school. And with this theme and with this focus on your journey and the advice that we have for those coming behind us. I'm not young. I'm well preserved, but I'm not young. And so the journey has been, for me, not a traditional one, circuitous and an early bloomer and a late bloomer. And so what I'm wanting for everyone to know and to take away is that there is an inner still voice that tells you to find your tribe. Find your tribe, follow your bliss. And even though in my particular journey, there were decades of hardship, not able to make ends meet, highly educated, but just determined to stay on mission. The work that's being done here by the women who you've heard from, and all of the allies in their networks. Yes, if you want to build a nation, support a woman, or I know I'm mangling the quote somewhat, but we know on the ground, and we know from our community organizing, that most of who's coming out to our meetings, most of who's, pinching a little bit off of their purse to make things happen, these are the women. And we have an opportunity as we're looking forward, and in Chicago at Blacks in Green, where we're advancing the sustainable square mile. That's the walk to work, walk to shop, walk to learn, walk to play village, where African Americans own the businesses, own the land, and live the conservation lifestyle. And we're calling the conservation lifestyle households and homesteads that produce their own energy, grow their own food, clean their own water, and recycle their own waste. That here in our sustainable square mile of West Woodlawn, we are looking at the next generation and the pipeline and how we can connect from the high schools to the colleges into internship and into employment. And although that's not, that's nothing groundbreaking, but it's really, really hard work. It's stuff that has to be done structurally, intentionally, and with lots of beautiful coaches and mentors who are very patient. Um, I may not fall in that category, but I do have a commitment, and we have a growing staff here. Um, when we talk about the Great Migration, which we do a lot here, and the conservation lifestyle, which we inherited from our ancestors, we have an opportunity and I'll say an actual duty to return to our roots. I call myself Naomi Davis. I'm the proud granddaughter of Mississippi sharecroppers, um, who, like 7 million others, voted with their feet to move up south here in Chicago for freedom and opportunity and economic opportunity. But though I was born the day before Emmett Till was murdered, and though I saw the rise of the civil rights movement over a 50-year arc, we've also become very, very clear with the environmental justice decision in Louisiana recently and reports recently showing that we have zero wealth as a people, that we missed something along the way. And it's our duty, those of us who come from the most privileged generation of African American children in history, to bring that forward to a next generation. How? One of the things that we're doing at Blacks in Green, because I was too young to be a freedom rider, but because during the advent of the age of television, we could actually experience up close and personal what the heroes and heroines were doing on the front lines. We want to remind our youngest people, elementary and high school people, that there is a need for that kind of courage right now, and to support and cultivate that kind of courage. Some of you all know we're the owners of the Emmett and Mamie Till Mobley House here in Westwood Lawn, Chicago. And so this is very much at the center of our work of carrying the history forward and building a new tradition of leadership. So our young sustainable square mile manager right out of school, and the ways that we can cultivate her as a community organizer in our neighborhood, working to create the new freedom riders and to tell the story in so many ways. And I'll say this and I'll close, which is I'm a child of the theater. I grew up from a very small girl all through college and into a profession in the theater. I know the power of theater to change hearts and minds, and that's one of the things we're doing with this next generation, with the youth in our sustainable square mile, is we're creating a little repertory company. I was in a repertory company when I was a teenager, and to tell those stories, to build that pride, because one of the issues we have is self-hate projected. We've been taught to hate ourselves. We can be taught to love ourselves, and we must. And for those of you who are interested in talking about or cultivating a youth theater new freedom rider movement where you live, I'm happy to be part of that conversation. And so grateful to be alive in the time of Harris and the possibility of a great transformation in the country driven by a Black woman.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing about the importance of preservation of cultural identity within EJ, as well as speaking on self-sustainable, self-sufficient, walkable communities within Black neighborhoods. Wonderful work that Blacks in Green is doing. I'm also a child of theater, so that piqued my interest. Arts at the intersection of EJ is ever growing and very important. So I just wanted to kind of pivot into a question for you. And I know you spoke about your new employee, and you said she's fresh out of school and younger. I wanted to see, how does Blacks in Green specifically support and uplift youth within the green economy and environmental justice movement?
Yeah, well, she's so smart and so eager. She really has been leading me in the process of leading her, I'll say. Um, the idea at Blacks and Green is that we're all involved in some level of professional development. So, with this young lady, the idea is putting together a particular curriculum for her. She has um, a great passion for media and communications. And so, cultivating her in her public speaking opportunities, she's taken the initiative, which we've supported, to join several coalitions. Um, and the idea that it's really challenging sometimes to balance how you cultivate your external relationships. And of course, in this work, it's all about the network. It's all about the relationships. It's all about how do you balance what you're doing on the 12 committees you're serving on, with the duties that you have at work. So I've taken just recently taken her under my wing to do two specific things. And I don't know how much people know about nonprofit management per se, but it's not something, I mean, it's something that people think you can just jump in and anybody can do it. And you can jump in and anyone can do it. But when you're running a
My
business,
wife watched the first episode of Secret Lives of More Wise, and when I tell you, in these white folks business, they got all kind of business to get into. Let me tell you everything that happened in just
Sorry,
a
Donnell, could you just, we hear that. Sorry about that. Quick. Sorry about that. You're
um,
fine. You're fine.
should I continue?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. So we're looking at um, how to cultivate management skills on the ground. The idea that their program management and community organizing are disciplines that that people are just kind of they're thrown into it. Well, you got a program, you're going to do it. You don't know that there's necessarily a fixed budget, that there's a reporting structure, or there's metrics or evaluations, that there's a budget to actual. In community organizing, everybody thinks they're a community organizer. I don't want to denigrate anybody's happiness around their participation on the ground, but it's an art and it's a science. And if you're clear about some of the science of relationship building, and if you're also clear about the science of data collection, you don't have community organizing if you don't have data and a system for data and a place where it lives and a methodology for collecting it. And so I'm working with her, kind of in a one-on-one coaching relationship to build her ability to be in practice on the ground. She's right now running. She's not running it, but she's a key part of our geothermal team as well, which is a I think a lot of folks know what geothermal is, but we've got a pilot which is 20 blocks, and we are working with the technology, with the infrastructure, where we're putting where we will be advancing to put the technology 300 feet or so down in the ground, but going to our neighbors, house to house. What's your power bill? Will you share it with us? You can redact your private information, but in order to really focus on savings, and in the years ahead, where we're expecting the transition to slowly take place, what kind of relationships are you building? How are you teaching your neighbors about the green economy opportunities? If you're a plumber, this is a good time to be a plumber. If you're an electrician, this is a good time to be an electrician. And making sure that those relational and data collection skills are really deepened by an actual curriculum. So we've reached out to one of our funders that focuses on organizing and advocacy to talk to them about a training program that they're recommending for us. And she's going to be the first person in. Does that answer your question? Is those some relevant examples?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely, because you're speaking kind of on your current focus and what your future directions and what you're aiming to kind of reach in the near future, and speaking about how you're molding, well, I guess learning from each other, moving into this space. And of course, when you speak of the importance of data and communities, that it can't move forward. And thankfully, I mean, I know we're in a space that's very heavily technology driven, and there are pluses and minuses. However, within the environmental justice movement, we know that with the technology being more incorporated, building capacity within these communities, helping train them within these technical spaces, that only boosts
Yeah.
positives for within the environmental justice movement.
And on the policy side, that energy is a life
Absolutely.
essential service.
Absolutely.
And as such, it is a human right. And what do we know about the utilities? What we have a campaign for energy affordability that we're looking to tie her, the way that she's going to be communicating and educating and engaging and inspiring neighbors to come on board will include, will you go to Springfield with us? That's our state capital. Will you sign a petition? Will you wear a t-shirt? Will you show up at a rally? Will you talk to your neighbors? Will you help us? You get the picture. But the advocacy, the art of human relating, the science of data collection, all of these things, you know, she's smart. She comes from a good school, but this is not intuitive. And unless you took the course, you don't know. So it's that kind of thing. And really, we're probably a year more off from just actually having a college cohort where we can interface and have them intern with us. But it's definitely, I'm an HBCU graduate. I'm a FISC girl, so I'm looking at how we how we can be a blessing and a connection with our HBCUs across the country. Amen.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. I know we have a little bit of time left, so I was able to kind of hear from Dr. White Newsom what's currently happening within the CEQ. So I wanted to give Peggy and Donnell a chance to speak on some current focuses and directions within your own respective organizations. So Peggy, we know that we act as the Region 2, one of the Region 2 leaders for the TICTAC, the Region 2 TICTAC, I should say. You've been a leader in environmental justice advocacy for decades. What are your current focuses within We Act, and what are some key initiatives or campaigns that you're most excited about right now, so the people can know?
Well, certainly running the Technical Assistance Center for New York and New Jersey has been very important, and it's been very challenging. It's very important that this 600 billion that Dr. J said is coming into our communities, it's important that it actually gets to community, because we've seen large amounts of money in the past that are supposed to be meant for certain organizations and they never get it. So how do we ensure that some of the smallest organizations in the country have the capacity to write grants, to really develop strong programs that are going to be protective of their communities? So we have assembled a fabulous team of people who are working to reach out, to work one-on-one with groups, to understand how to develop grants. We have a partnership with the NYU Center for Law and Justice, so that they can do workshops so that people understand what are the energy issues, what's the vocabulary that you need to use when you're writing a grant, what are all of those issues that are going to be coming out of the Department of Energy that you need to know about, and that you need to be able to write successfully about. So the TIC-TAC is very important in ensuring that this money actually goes to the communities to which it was intended. Certainly, I have appreciated over the years, having been a chair of the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council to the EPA. That took years of advocacy on the part of environmental justice organizations around the country to create that. That's very strong. And I'm very honored to be a co-chair of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, a bit modeled on the NEJAC, but very important today, as Dr. J has talked about, because we are basically developing specific recommendations to the administration, to the White House, on how they should be thinking about Justice 40, how they should be thinking about developing environmental justice programs in every federal agency, so that all of those agencies are working together, because we have to understand intersectionality. And you know, somebody wrote a book, some academic wrote a book on that a couple of years ago, and everybody acted like it was something new. Environmental justice is totally about intersectionality. And that is what all of us is. It's certainly what I've been doing for the last 36 years. And what does that mean? It means healthy housing, because we can't do, that's where we spend most of our time. And so we began working on indoor air quality. We have a community working group on healthy housing so that we can gather all of the folks in public housing and private housing that have key issues so that they can work together and we understand the choices that need to be made to be more protective. And of course, today, healthy housing also means building decarbonization. How do we, ensure that we can rid carbon of our buildings so that we can really ensure that climate change is not killing our communities? So healthy housing is very, very important. And we've also realized how important it is to bring these issues directly to our community. It's not enough to go downtown and deal with all the powers that be. We've got to have these briefings, these conferences actually in the hood, in our communities, so that people know, yeah, this is for you. This is for the people who live here. It's not about going downtown, because we're talking about our own issues in our own neighborhoods. And then when we think about intersectionality, we understand public health. You heard Ms. Donnell talking about her work with the University of Michigan. We've had a 22-year relationship with the Columbia School of Public Health that has been immeasurable in terms of really getting to the issues of children's environmental health, the issues of asthma, the issues of air quality. And so again, working with the public health community has been essential for the environmental justice sector. And then again, we think a lot about the foundation of our work being based in racial equity and democracy. You know, there's a lot of talk now about democracy, as if that's something separate over there. You know, we are doing democracy. We are getting people to go down to that city council, to go up to that state legislature, to make their voices heard. That is democracy. And so again, we hope that in terms of racial equity, that our civil rights brothers and sisters would be a little closer to us. And I think that's still a challenge for the environmental justice movement. But we are doing racial equity and democracy work. And we are going to continue to scale up that work. We're going to continue to look at the green jobs issues that Ms. Donnell and Dr. Beverly Wright have been working on for 30 years. You know, we've been doing worker training and we've been able to develop a worker cooperative of
Yes.
12 young men who have banded together. We've done the training for solar and other kinds of construction activities, and now they've banded together, and we need to um, get them business. But our vice president said that she wants to give a $25,000 benefit to new businesses. And one thing we found out with our worker cooperative is I'm like, okay, so you all can start bidding on jobs from the city, but guess what? They can't because they're not a minority business enterprise. Guess what? You need 25,000 in the bank, at least in New York City, to be able to be certified as an MBE. So,
Yeah.
there are all these little challenges that we don't know until we get down to the nitty gritty. And so when I heard that discussion about small businesses, that's exactly what we need. It's not enough just to have a green job. We need to own a green business.
Right.
That's right.
And we can't do that if we can't establish and gather the capital. So again, there's so many issues, there's so many opportunities. We have an administration that Dr. J is working for that is helping to create the most opportunities the environmental justice community has had ever. And we've got to be here to take that challenge, to take that opportunity. We've got to be prepared. We've got to be together. Danelle and I are now in Memphis at an environmental justice leadership forum of 50 groups because we've got to come together with a strong voice. And we've got to ensure that those of us, like Danelle and I, who have been doing this work longer, can help those small groups that are just coming up. So again, the democracy of coming together and having a strong, strong voice is really where we need to go. And that's what I'm thinking about for creating a better future for others like me and for our communities.
Thank you so much, Peggy. That was wonderful. I mean, honestly, there's so much, as you can hear, there's so much that needs to be done, so much that has been done. Thank you for your immeasurable contributions to this environment, to the environmental justice field as Black women, as leaders, as amazing people. We are so thankful for you, everything you've done thus far, everything you are about to do. Remember, everyone who's listening, you stand firm, stand out, be confident, always be prepared, block out the noise, and always speak up. So thank you once again for joining us for this wonderful session, my sister's keeper. We are so grateful for our women in EJ. We are so grateful for all our speakers, Ms. Donna Wilkins, Ms. Peggy Shepard, Dr. Jerome White Newsom, and Ms. Naomi Davis. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you and enjoy the rest of the symposium. Bye, everyone.